to both our committees. They have been a great ally to our committee over the years in discussing many of the issues important to veteran small business owners. We are here today to examine a challenge that many service-disabled veteran small business owners face in doing work with the federal government. The Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business, or SDVOSB, contracting program is crucial for veteran entrepreneurs and the federal agencies they work with. However, there are two similar, yet separate and conflicting verification programs at two different agencies. Both the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Small Business Administration operate procurement programs for SDVOSBs. There's a number of differences between the two programs, but the central issue is simple. VA proactively verifies SDVOSBs before they can compete for set-aside contracts, while SBA allows SDVOSBs to simply self-certify. This can create inconsistent outcomes, such as a business qualifying as a SDVOSB for VA contracts, but not other federal agency contracts, or vice versa. And while SBA certified businesses awards are subject to protest, the lack of a front-end verification also leaves the door open for fraud and abuse. Since the creation of the SDVOSB preference, Congress has recognized the importance of streamlining the verification process for service-disabled veteran small business owners. As the title of this hearing suggests, government-wide verification is a viable solution to this problem. Members of previous Congresses recognize this too, and they began paving the way. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017 instructed SBA and VA to unify the definitions for SDVOSBs and began moving regulatory responsibility from VA to SBA. I hope this hearing provides the opportunity to learn more about the progress both agencies have made. I was pleased to see that the administration also recognizes the importance of streamlining these programs. President Trump's reform plan for the federal government, released just last month, cites the need for a one-stop shop for small business federal procurement programs. SBA has already made a head start through the launch of their website, certify.sba.gov, and we are committed to working with them to see it through. While the concept may seem simple, we know developing a single government-wide verification system for SDVOSBs will require a lot of work on the part of the SBA, VA, and the congressional committees who will oversee it. Past joint hearings between our committees have revealed many critiques of VA's verification program, and we must ensure that those mistakes are not repeated. We also must make certain there is proper congressional oversight and that set-aside contracts are going to true service-disabled veteran small business owners. I hope we can have a productive conversation today to answer many of the questions that still remain. I am also pleased that representatives of the SDVOSB community are here to bring their perspective into the conversation. I now yield to a ranking member, Ms. Adams, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Thank you for holding this important hearing. It is my pleasure to be here as we discuss a critical topic that impacts our nation's veterans and identify ways to improve their access to the federal contracting marketplace and entrepreneurial development. These courageous individuals deserve not only our enduring gratitude, but also the opportunity to build a new life after their many years of military service. One of the most important tools we currently provide is the Contracting Preference Program to ensure greater participation of veterans in the federal marketplace. In fact, the Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Procurement Program dispersed almost $18 billion through over 170,000 contracts in FY 2017. SDVOSB awards accounted for approximately 4.05% of federal contracts, which exceeded the 3% statutory goal. Notably, the government awarded 5.29%, or $23.4 billion of its prime contracts to veteran-owned small businesses. With this accomplishment, we should applaud. It should be applauded, but it should also point out that these growing numbers show an increasing need for higher utilization of emerging veteran-owned small businesses throughout the government. It's clear that the structure and resources of the program have not kept pace with its growth, creating concerns that contracts could be diverted from legitimate service-disabled veteran-owned firms to non-veteran businesses, including large corporations. Fortunately, steps are being taken to address these anxieties. One step involves changing the certification process, specifically moving from self-certification to enabling SBA to certify all veteran-owned businesses alongside several disabled veteran-owned businesses increases confidence around their certifications. Such a simple modification can foster more participation of veterans in the federal marketplace. Previously, GAO has found that the less rigorous verification process has allowed ineligible, non-service disabled veteran firms to win contracts set aside for veterans through fraudulent front companies posing as veterans and pass-throughs. As a result, millions of dollars were diverted away from legitimate small business owned by veterans. To prevent these abuses, VA complied with GAO's verification recommendations from a 2013 report, and the agency has seen significant improvements. As our committees have heard, verification times decreased by more than 50%, and the VA has increased its number of site visits to 606 in fiscal year 2015. However, there are many areas that need work. Currently, it takes approximately 73 days to process certification applications, and a sizable backlog still exists. For many reasons, the VA has proposed to move verification and certification responsibilities to SBA. The VA has also suggested revising program regulations to streamline and align requirements to reduce the burden on contractors. So I look forward to discussing these changes today. Today's hearing will focus on the progress of the Department of Veteran Affairs and the Small Business Administration in implementing sections from FY 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. It's my hope that we will also establish SBA's ability to take on the remaining VA verification functions and discuss the need to authorize a veteran-specified entrepreneur education program. Given that entrepreneurship remains a viable career path for many veterans, we must ensure that they have the support they need to start and grow their business. I think I can speak for all the members today in saying that we do whatever it takes to help all veterans, including those disabled, in the line of duty to overcome the challenges they face in today's economy. And with that, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the witnesses for appearing before the joint subcommittees this afternoon. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. I now yield to the chairman of the Subcommittee of Oversight and Investigations, Mr. Bergman, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly. My colleagues from the Veterans Affairs Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee and I are pleased to join you today to discuss this important topic. The Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business, or SDVOSB, Contracting Preference Program is a crucial element of the commitment of this country, of our country, and its government that we make to our veterans. At least 3% of contract spending at every agency is set aside for SDVOSBs. VA gives even greater preferences in its Veterans First program and extends those preferences also to veteran-owned small business. The Veterans First program is not without controversy. Chairman Kelly and Ranking Member Adams, the Small Business Committee, has been a great partner for many years, working to ensure the program lives up to its promise. We have before us today a confusing bureaucratic oddity that should not exist. SDVOSBs contracting with the VA are vetted, inspected, and verified. SDVOSBs contracting with the rest of federal government are not. They self-certify their status. There are effectively two classes of SDVOSBs, and it can be hard to tell the difference. No one knows precisely how many self-certified SDVOSBs are fraudulent or otherwise improper, but all available evidence indicates that they do exist. Service-disabled veterans who undergo VA's thorough, some would say onerous, screening of their small businesses deserve a level playing field. It is unfair that companies that cannot pass muster move on to operate in less strict areas of the contracting world. Many other agencies recognize this and have attempted to require VA's verification, but current law and regulation do not allow that to happen. The need for government-wide verification of SDVOSBs is a perennial issue that has existed since the SDVOSB preferences were created. Achieving it has been a long-term goal of several VA secretaries, SBA administrators, and Congresses. It is high time that we made this change. Frankly, it makes no sense that VA should be responsible for the SDVOSB program, while the Small Business Administration is responsible for every other small business program. The previous Congress recognized this and laid the groundwork for government-wide verification. The fiscal year 2017 National Defense Authorization Act harmonized regulatory definitions between VA and SBA and began transferring regulatory responsibility to SBA. I was encouraged to see the administration highlighted this issue in its government reform and reorganization plan. It recommends, and I quote, a one-stop shop within SBA for all federal contracting certifications. Another quote comes to mind, slightly paraphrased. President Reagan said that a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life that we will ever see on this earth. This is too often true, but maybe not in this case. I credit the leadership of VA for their willingness to relinquish the verification function and eventually abolish the Center for Verification and Evaluation. I also appreciate the leadership of SBA's receptiveness to take on perhaps the largest and most complicated small business certifications program. The concept of government-wide verification is simple, but there are numerous pitfalls in its implementation that we must avoid. As some might say, the devil is in the details. VA has spent years, tumultuous years, working the bugs out of the verification system. We should not reinvent the wheel. At the same time, SBA will be expected to eliminate unnecessary differences in eligibility rules and procedures between the SDVOSB program and other small business programs. However, verifications cannot be interrupted while the transfer occurs, so business owners will see minimal impact. Also, veteran-owned small businesses, or VOSBs, should know that they will not be forgotten. They will continue to receive the same preference in the Veterans First program, and they will continue to have access to verification. My goal is to take VA's lessons learned, SBA's expertise and resources, and the veteran business community's perspective as represented by the American Legion, and put them together as the two committees craft bipartisan legislation in the coming weeks. It is important to start this process out in the open with all stakeholders represented. We have to create a government-wide verification system that stands the test of time. Thank you, Chairman Kelly, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Bergman. I now yield to the ranking member of Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, Ms. Custer, for our opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly and Ranking Member Adams, for your hospitality in hosting this joint hearing. According to the Small Business Administration, over 2.52 million businesses in America are majority owned by veterans. Approximately 80% of veteran-owned businesses employ less than 19 employees, meaning that a majority of these small businesses are actually very small. In fact, 54% of all veteran-owned businesses employ less than 4 employees. Based on these numbers, it's clear that veteran-owned small businesses are crucial to a healthy and vibrant American business community. However, due to their incredibly small sizes, veteran-owned small businesses are especially impacted by our federal rules. They often can't afford to have a dedicated contract officer to ensure that they're able to maximize the benefits offered by veteran preference programs, and therefore these programs must be as simple and accessible as possible. In an effort to simplify access to the programs, Congress recently expressed support for the administration's desire to streamline the veteran-owned small business certification process. The legislation being discussed today would prove to be a pragmatic next step in ensuring that both the interpretation and enforcement of various veteran preference programs are aligned. Currently, both the Small Business Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs have various roles and responsibilities throughout the certification process. This has led to confusion and threatens the integrity of the service-disabled veteran-owned small business program. By allowing the SBA to certify these small businesses for inclusion in the VA's veteran-owned small business programs, we can address confusing and conflicting issues surrounding certification for various programs. All businesses would be certified as an eligible veteran-owned small business prior to applying for veteran preference programs at any federal agency. No longer will a company have to satisfy different requirements just to apply for the preference. If you're certified, you can apply. At the end of the day, this is a common sense solution, and I look forward to our discussion. I'm sure that my colleagues across the aisle will agree that this is a viable solution to overburdensome regulation, and I appreciate the Small Business Committee's commitment to our nation's heroes. I look forward to a productive discussion, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Custer. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that they be submitted for the record. I'd like to take a moment to explain the timing lights for you. You will each have 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. All of you are familiar with this, I think. The light will start out as green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. And finally, at the end of your 5 minutes, it will turn red. I ask that you try to adhere as closely as possible to the time limit. I would like to introduce our panel of witnesses today. Our first witness is Mr. Thomas Linney. Mr. Linney is the Executive Director of Small Business and Veterans Program at the Department of Veteran Affairs, where he oversees the procurement programs for veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. He is also a veteran of the United States Army, having served 22 years. Thank you for your service and for testifying today. Our second witness is Mr. Rob Wong. Mr. Wong is the Associate Administrator for the Office of Government Contracting and Business Development at the Small Business Administration. In this role, he oversees over $500 billion in total government spending within the federal marketplace and ensures that small businesses can compete for federal contracts. Thank you for testifying today, Mr. Wong. Our third witness is Mr. William Gould, Senior Advisor in the Office of the Administration at the Small Business Association. Mr. Gould has been active within an interagency committee between the SBA and VA and has played a leading role in the effort to streamline the verification programs. Thank you for being here today. I will now yield to the Ranking Member, Ms. Adams, to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Davy Leghorn, Assistant Director of the National Employment and Education Division for the American Legion, the largest veteran service organization in the country. In his current capacity, Mr. Leghorn oversees the employment and small business portfolios and administers the American Legion's National Veterans Hiring Initiative. Prior to joining the American Legion, he served in the United States Army as both a mortar infantryman and a civil air affairs specialist. Welcome, Mr. Legion, and thank you for your service.
I now recognize Mr. Linney for 5 minutes.
Chairman Bergman, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Custer, Ranking Member Adams, and members of the subcommittees, thank you for inviting me to testify on the status of our efforts to implement a uniform standard for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses in federal contracting. In my capacity as Executive Director for VA Small and Veteran Business Programs, I oversee the Center for Verification and Evaluation that verifies veteran ownership and control of small businesses participating in VA's Veterans First contracting program, as part of the statutory mandate set forth by you in 38 U.S.C. 8127. This legislation directs VA to prioritize veteran-owned small businesses above all other categories when the VA seeks to buy goods and services. CVE carries out its mission to verify ownership and control of SDVOSBs and VOSBs and to maintain a database of those firms that is used by our contracting officers to determine whether a Veterans First set-aside is appropriate. As of June 30th, there are more than 14,000 VOSBs in our VIP database. The growth in the number of verified VOSBs has made VA more likely to use the Veterans First program as its principal means to provide access for small businesses. In fact, The VA has been able to increase its procurement award to VOSBs to more than $5.38 billion in FY17. In response to the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017, the VA and the SBA have worked together to create uniform standards for the VA and SBA programs for contracting with SDVOSBs. After extensive collaboration, these efforts are approaching completion. VA has published a proposed rule on January 10, 2018, and SBA published its proposed rule on January 29th. The commencement period for both proposed rules, or the comment period, for both proposed rules ended in March, and we anticipate publishing final rules before the end of fiscal year 2018 to be fully compliant with your guidance to establish a joint rule. The NDAA also amended the statutory language to provide an appeal right for denied applicants and for status protests of set-aside awards to SBA's Office of Hearing and Appeals. These replaced appeal and protest procedures formerly conducted by my office. SBA and VA, again, have collaborated to implement this guidance, and SBA published a final rule amending the Office of Hearing and Appeals rules on 30 March 2018. This piece of the implementation is complete, and the new rules will take effect on October 1st, 2018. In addition, SBA and VA have reached an interagency agreement to cover the Office of Hearing and Appeals costs in deciding these matters for the VA. In addition to making the improvements mandated in NDA 2017, the VA is working closely with SBA to carry out the proposal to consolidate all business contracting program into the SBA that was contained in the administration's proposal for reorganization of the executive branch. VA and SBA have formed a joint committee reporting to the deputies of VA and SBA to examine how we can support the President's proposal by moving the VA verification program to the SBA as part of a government-wide certification program for SDVOSBs. The committee meets monthly to address resource, technology, and process implications of such a move. We recognize that such an action will require authorizing legislation, and the VA stands ready to assist the SBA and the committees in that effort. And we believe that based on the work that we're doing today with the SBA, that will enable us to implement this legislation promptly once passed. Mr. Chairman, I'll be pleased to answer any questions you or the members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Linney, and I now recognize Mr. Wong for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and ranking members. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about the service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. There appear to be two aspects to today's hearings. One is SBA's progress with implementing NDAA provisions related to single uniform standards, and the other is SBA's future role in certifying SDVOSB businesses. As head of the SBA's Program Office for GCBD, which is Government Contracting and Business Development, both areas fall under our program office and my leadership. I will be speaking to the first topic this afternoon. On the second topic, I'll yield to my colleague Bill Gould, who will be leading our agency's engagement with the VA. As you know, the 2017 NDAA created a single uniform definition of service-disabled veteran-owned small business in the Small Business Act and deleted the former VA provision. The law also directed SBA and the VA to develop a joint rule. Over the course of 2017, SBA collaborated with the VA, and in January of this year, both agencies published proposed rules. The comment periods for both closed in March. SBA continues to consult with the VA and is on track to issue a final rule before the end of this fiscal year. The 2017 NDAA also provided an avenue for protests and appeals involving the VA's CVE program. These are now being decided by SBA's Office of Hearings and Appeals, or OHA. And SBA published a final rule implementing these provisions at the end of March. This has an effective date to coincide with the SBA's anticipated issuance of the ownership and control rule discussed previously. With this change, the VA will reimburse OHA for deciding the matters related to the VA's program. Let me next briefly preview the second topic, certification. Currently, SBA certifies businesses in the 8A Business Development Program and the Hub Zone Program. And we have a legislative mandate to establish a certification program for our third program, which is the Women-Owned Small Businesses. At this time, We are in the exploratory phase with the VA of considering whether SBA should also certify the SDVOSBs. This is an idea and an opportunity that Administrator McMahon has discussed personally with then Acting VA Secretary Wilkie. Through their leadership, the agencies have been engaged in regular discussions for which SBA has been led by my colleague Bill Gould. For further detail, I will allow him to outline our activity and interactions with the VA. For my part, let me say that this is an idea that we like. We are moving forward, but we also need to get this one right. This is a huge task with new authority and responsibility and also potential new benefits. For the communities that we serve through this program, the continuity of business operation is critical for veterans, and also their ease of use in applying. We also understand that we need to make this process easy for the government to get to a quality solution that supports our veterans and our government. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong, and I now recognize Mr. Gould for 5 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me the chance to update you on SBA's collaboration with the VA on certification of service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, or SDVOSBs. On behalf of the agency and the SBA administrator, I've been leading the SBA team on our engagement with the VA. The SBA and VA formed a working group in December of 2017. The group consists of 6 members each from the VA and SBA from different parts of the organizations. We meet monthly to discuss progress, address questions, and plan next steps. Among the areas that we have been reviewing are certification process details, IT system discussions in and around compatibility and data migration, and legislative, regulatory, and funding implications. As Rob mentioned, this is a good opportunity for the federal government and our customers. However, we have many items to work through before we get there. To give you a sense of the size and scale of this proposal, SBA processes around 3,500 applications a year for our current certification programs, the 8A program and the historically underutilized business zone, also known as the Hub Zone program. The VA, on the other hand, processes around 15,000 applications per year. SBA's future lies in a single unified certification program with consistent terminology, similar documentation requirements, and the same timelines, all operating on a single information technology system. Each of the current certifications will require changes to the rules and regulations governing it, some legislative, some regulatory, and some just procedural. SBA is currently in the process of unifying the full certifications into the newly launched certify.sba.gov system. This will have 2 major benefits: a simplified user experience and a synchronized process and single data set for SBA to manage. The small business owner will be able to log in and see her certifications and status. She'll be able to apply for additional certifications by only having to submit the additional documents, not starting from scratch. For the SBA, this will have the major benefit of having certification data in a single system, allowing personnel access to small businesses' data across all its certifications. With the processes consistent across the certifications, personnel should be able to analyze and process any application received, rather than be specialized in a particular program. The Women-Owned Small Business, or WOSB program, will be the next certification to go into the Certify system, and this will happen during the next fiscal year. Taking advantage of the processes established by the previous 2 certifications, making it a government-wide, and thereby making WOSB a government-wide recognized certification. Because of the similarity between WOSB and the SDVOSB certifications, we will have set the groundwork for the migration of the SDVOSB certification from the VA. The biggest factor in WOSB and SDVOSB certification is estimating the volume of applications and having the personnel and system capability to digest the potentially huge numbers. Remember, 3,500 we're currently doing now, 15,000 from SDVOSBs, and 15,000 WOSBs. So we're moving from 3,500 to over 33,000 per year. When we established the WOSB process and requirements, which we estimate to be a similar number to the VA, VA volunteered to adjust its current certification process to more closely align with the SBA's process to help ease the transition. This is currently still being discussed between the organizations in our working group. Additionally, the working group is developing plans for marketing the new government-wide certification across government and business community to increase awareness and the opportunities for SDVOSBs. Government contracting officers and program managers need to have a solid understanding of the new certification in order to issue contracts to these newly certified entities. And small business owners need to understand the process and value of this new certification. I hope that this gives you a broad sense of the discussion parameters between our two agencies, as well as an appreciation for the scope of this project. There will be a lot of work to be done, but we are making good progress. We certainly welcome your continued interest and engagement as part of this process. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and we look forward to addressing any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gould, and we now recognize Mr. Leghorn for 5 minutes.
Chairman Bergman, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Custer and Adams, and distinguished members of both subcommittees, on behalf of our National Commander, Denise Rohan, and the 2 million members of the American Legion, we thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. We are privileged to present our position on the Small Business Administration's ability to assume the functions of the Department of Veteran Affairs Center for Verification and Evaluation. Currently, 13 CFR Part 125 and 38 CFR Part 74 outline similar rules and regulations for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses applying for certification. Earlier this year, the federal government initiated an alignment of regulations governing SDVOSB definitions. However, as the American Legion noted in previous testimony, the regulations have always been similar. Problems arise from inconsistent enforcement between VA and SBA. Despite maintaining similar regulations, VA requires businesses applying for SDVOSB status to address size, ownership, and control issues prior to agency certification. In contrast, SBA allows businesses to self-certify that they meet the requisite regulatory threshold to be considered SDVOSBs. Self-certification permits businesses to qualify for all federal contract awards with the exception of the Veterans First Contracting Program within VA. SBA does not have a front-end process to verify the authenticity of SDVOSBs and relies on community policing and status protests to maintain programmatic integrity. The problem with having two SDVOSB identification processes is simple. It creates confusion for contracting officers seeking to award contracts to SDVOSBs, and it creates confusion for veteran companies attempting to gain certification. Absent statutory requirement, many state and federal agencies often inquire whether a veteran business is certified by VA CVE. As such, many veteran companies acquire CVE certifications when they do not need it. Deconflicting SDVOSB certifications goes beyond the move towards a single set of regulations. It also requires the consolidation of accrediting processes to a singular certifying agency. The federal government's reevaluation of SDVOSB certification will likely shift verification responsibilities from VA to SBA. The American Legion supports the administration's plans to consolidate the verification process to the SBA. SBA has a proven workflow platform that can potentially handle SDVOSB certifications. VA will likely continue validating veteran and service-connected disability status, but SBA will verify size, ownership, and control standards. The American Legion makes the following recommendations. In soliciting public comments, SBA proposed to amend the definition in 13 CFR Part 125.11 by incorporating language from VA's regulations and also from SBA's 8A Business Development Program regulations. Currently, the SDVOSB is a set-aside program and not a business development program. The alignment of the regulations will, in essence, hold SDVOSBs to the same standard and rigor of the BD programs, but they will receive none of the benefits. The American Legion believes the incorporation of BD assistance into SDVOSB program is the logical next step and consistent with the regulatory merging of 13 CFR Part 125.11 with 8A language and the prospective move of current CVE responsibilities to SBA. Lastly, the American Legion believes moving the verification program is not a punitive measure. VA has done much to establish SDVOSBs as a credible workforce. VA invested in the implementation of the Vets First and the verification program within with agency-generated funds. CVE overcame many programmatic hurdles since its inception, and VA's investment proved to state and federal agencies the value of veteran businesses as a preferred contracting group. However, the veteran small business industrial base, for the veteran and small business industrial base to grow beyond just the Vets First program, verification must leave the confines of the VA. With the move towards a singular standard for SDVOSB definition, the shifting of appellate cases to the SBA's Office of Hearing and Appeals, and SBA's successful integration of certified.sba.gov, this is the right time to hand verification off to the SBA and sunset the system of self-certification. Chairman Bergman, Chairman Kelly, ranking members Custer and Adams, and distinguished members of both subcommittees, we thank you for the opportunity to explain the position of the 2 million members of the American Legion, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Leghorn. I now yield myself 5 minutes for my round of questions. And Mr. Gould, I'm going to start with you. I'd like to start with a general question. You've been discussing the concept of government-wide verification with the VA for some time. Can you give us a progress report on the problems you have solved and the ones that still remain? And specifically, one of the problems I would like for you to address is going from 3,500 to 35,000 verifications or processes. That's quite a jump. And so kind of tell me what you're doing to address to make sure that there's continuity and that we don't drop a whole lot or either get big backlogs with that number increase so much.
Well, you asked for a solution, sir, and we are not quite there yet, to be perfectly frank. That is a huge, huge number. What we are doing now, as I mentioned in my testimony, we are trying to consolidate the certification programs that we have now and unify them into a single certification program so that there's consistency in the terminology and how we are managing our certification programs. So when this monster lands on our lap, we are able to process this in a much more efficient way. And we're working with the VA to understand what their certification processes are so that we can incorporate some of their best practices into how we are managing all 4 of these certification programs that we have upcoming.
And what variables are you considering in order to fund an effective and responsible verification program at SBA?
Could you clarify?
Variables are you, I mean, that's a lot. So there's going to be a lot of funding. What variables are you considering and decide how much funding you need or you need to ask for and those kind of things?
And the variables are, you know, the primary variable is number of applicants we are going to receive, right? That is the primary variable, and it is unknown, right? We honestly don't know. That is the primary variable, and we just don't know how many people are going to want a full-blown government-wide certification versus a self-certification, because I think Chairman Bergman noted that it's an onerous process that some may or may not want to take on.
And Mr. Wong, I understand that SBA intends for the service-disabled, veteran-owned small business certification process to take place at certified.sba.gov, along with all other small business certifications. Can you walk me through what this would look like?
Well, I can try. So, in general, if you want to look at it this way, you know, as Bill says, this is a monster, right? So it's like the old joke, right? How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time, okay? So what we've been doing, we've actually taken this opportunity, knowing this is coming. We've taken, in our meetings, we're not just talking about how we're going to look at the service-disabled veteran-owned program and the way that we're processing these. We're taking this opportunity to realize that with the staff that we have, as an example, we have roughly 60 to 70 people that do 5,000 applications. If we take all of these in total, we're going to need roughly 18 times that. Well, that ain't happening. So we've got to do more with the people that we have. So really, what we're doing, if you look at my wall back in the office, we're basically taking the 8A program, which is 30 years old. We think we do that pretty well. You know, we take the elements of eligibility that we have, and roughly there's 9 of these, and then you have 7 of these, I think, for Hub Zone, then you have 4 of these for WOSB, then you have other elements that we can add to service-disabled veteran. what they're trying to do is to eliminate one of your primary concerns for the government, is to make sure that truly valid companies are getting these contracts. And so what we're trying to do is we have been working in 4 different silos. And what we're trying to do now is basically to take people, and the concept that we're looking at right now is to take our staff and turn them into analysts. We have the initial processing in general get to what we call an initial recommendation to the agency, and then from that point we have the processing of the 30,000 applications that we have, potential 30,000 applications we have, and then we're going to probably, we're looking at different scenarios of where we can take the power of the people that we have, make them analysts of the things that have been processed beforehand. But we're trying to find more efficiencies there. Right.
And just, I have 30 seconds left. Is it possible that many of the firms that previously self-certified with SBA will need to learn a new process to become verified?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, self-certification. I've been in this industry before, and I've seen how people do it. I think that I would just say this: that a more formal process, I think, will bring more order to the system.
Thank you, and I now yield back my time, and now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Adams, for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leghorn, previous witnesses have stated that generally veterans hire other veterans. Moreover, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses are much more likely to hire other veterans with disabilities or join with other such businesses to compete for a contract. Can you discuss the successes of veterans hiring veterans and what impact that plays to vets coming home and transitioning to civilian life?
Ma'am, thank you for your question. And in terms of one of the main reasons why the American Legion does such extensive work with the veteran-owned small business community is because we know that veterans hire veterans, and we see it every day. We have an extensive small business task force, and we meet regularly, and one of the things that we always talk about is rolling all the employment initiatives around the stuff that they're doing. So, this is something that's very important to us, and we constantly talk about it, and we're hoping to make a dent in veterans' employment through our advocacy in veteran small business.
Okay, so do you feel that breakdowns at individual agencies have impeded the ability of veterans to enter the federal marketplace?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Do you feel that breakdowns at individual agencies have impeded the ability of veterans to enter the federal marketplace?
And that is one of the issues that I think SBA verification will solve, because right now with self-certification, a lot of contracting officers are unsure about veteran-owned small businesses, and they're risk averse, and they're less likely to award contracts to a veteran firm that is self-certified. So in a lot of agencies outside of VA, what they're asking for CVE certification when statutorily they're not supposed to. So that does impede federal contracting.
Okay, let me move to Mr. Lenny. VA has made major achievements in small business contracting, particularly with the dollars awarded to SDVOSBs. However, this committee has heard that small businesses were deprived of billions in contracting dollars prior to the Kingdomware decision. So have you seen improvements in solicitations for veteran-owned and SDVOSBs at the VA and other agencies since then?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, as we look at the difference between 2016, which is the year of the Supreme Court decision, and or 2015, before the Supreme Court decision, and 2017, the year after the Supreme Court decision, we saw a 50% increase in the award of procurement awards to SDVOSBs and a 43% increase to veteran-owned small businesses.
Okay, thank you. So given the verification of veteran small business contracting programs will be moving to the SBA, how can our committees, both of our committees, help ensure that there's an increase in technical assistance provided to VSOBs and SDSOBs by the VA now that this function will be transitioned? And that's for any person on the panel. All of you may answer.
Let me take a stab at that. As we transfer the verification program to SBA certification, SBA still takes the lead in the development of small businesses, and we support the SBA program in that regard, and it won't change really what we do in that arena. What it merely does is helps consolidate and gain efficiencies through the certification program.
Okay, Ms. Swan?
Yes, ma'am. In a word, funding. Just to make sure that we have that, and then we have the support, and also to make sure that we go government-wide. I think that would be the most helpful.
Great. Mr. Gould?
Just to echo what they both said, I think we need the funding and your support to make this successful.
Okay, Mr. Leghorn, you've got the last leg up.
So one thing I would say is that I think there's still a reason why VA needs to stay in the process. They still have to verify veteran status and also service-connected disability status.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Adams. Dr. Marshall, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, General Bergman. Tell you what, following this conversation is worse than neuroanatomy was in medical school, trying to understand this. I've never seen such a thing. So the first thing we got to do is find out a simpler acronym. SDVOSBs is too much, okay? So I'm going to give you each 30 to 45 seconds. What can we do to make this simpler? If you were king, what would you do to make all this simpler, keeping in mind our goals here and maybe to, what we can do to help you make it simpler? And Mr. Leaney, you go first and we'll go down the row.
I think we're taking those actions, Dr.
Okay.
Marshall, by consolidating the verification process into an SBA certification process across the entire federal government will make it much simpler for small businesses, particularly those who are eligible for more than one program. We consciously make the process rigorous so that a contracting officer or a program manager can be very, very confident that a service-able veteran owns and controls a business. That raises the probability that they're going to be willing to set stuff aside. So we make no apologies about the rigor of the process.
Okay.
We have done a lot to simplify and streamline it. We've reduced the processing time. We made it much more applicant-friendly. And I think as we move it to the SBA, they have the same commitment, and I am confident that that will be done.
Great, thanks. Mr. Wong, anything else?
No, I'd just like to echo the thing. One of the things that's kind of cool is that we all know each other, right? We've been working together as a team for the last couple of months, and with your support, I think we can actually make this thing go. The main thing, my main drive when I came in to run GCBD was pretty simple. Make it easier for businesses to get our certifications and make money with them. But more importantly, with those certifications, that's one thing, but we're also focusing mostly on the government supply of contracts, right? It's great to have a certification, but if you don't make money from it, right, you have a situation where somebody has a product that they don't like, right? If they have something that they like, they might tell somebody. If they have something that they don't like, they'll tell everybody. So what I want to make sure is to focus to make the contracting officer's job easier. I would like them eventually to look at, I want them to look at small business first, and I want them to look for SBA certified companies to accomplish that.
Great, thanks. Mr. Gould, anything else to add there?
Just real quick, I think we're stuck with the acronym SDVOSB.
Okay.
I apologize. But as I noted earlier, we are looking to streamline the application process at the SBA. Right, when you log in, when a small business owner logs into certified.sba.gov, name, address, what certifications are you interested in, right? A checkbox. That will generate questions depending on which checkbox you chose, right? And just making it simple and very straightforward for the user. That is my goal of unifying all these certifications under SBA.
Mr. Leghorn, what else can we do?
I think we're already doing it, and I'd like to just echo what Mr. Gould said. One of the biggest problems that we had in the past was that two different agencies were doing it. So a lot of our veterans are not only exclusively in one group, they're either 8A and vet-owned, or they're women-owned and vet-owned. The move to a singular agency and a singular platform and one time where they could just enter in all their paperwork. That is the best possible outcome that could come from all of this.
Okay, thanks. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Ranking Member Custer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, General Bergman. I want to start with you, Mr. Leghorn, because there's one piece of this in terms of getting rid of the sort of overburdensome government regulation. If the certification is transferred to the SBA, should the SBA also eliminate the self-certification program? In other words, I'm a little confused by the discussion, and we can let others respond after you do, but whether there's still going to exist the duplicative programs.
I think that with the move, self-certification should go away because it causes just a lot of confusion across the board, not only for contracting officers, but for veterans seeking certification as well. And it's not only the contracting officers at the federal level, but at the state levels as well, because a lot of the states are think that some of the certifications are reciprocal.
So, Mr. Gould, would you agree, and do you have the resources necessary for just streamlining and not having the duplicative programs?
Tricky question. Currently, we do not have the resources. But there is talk about keeping the self-certification program for subcontracting, right? The full-blown certification program, which we are taking from the VA, would be for prime contracts. But there is a need for a subcontractor to be an SDVOSB on occasion. And he or she may not have gone through the full-blown certification process, so we're still analyzing whether there's a true need for the self-certification program.
And Mr. Wong, any comment on that?
Yes, just a compliment to what Mr. Gould has said and what Mr. Leghorn has said. You know, the balance that you have is between getting it right and also continuity of operation. We're trying to do the best because, again, the goal is to make sure that when people get our certification, they go to work, because when they go to work, they put Americans to work, and I think that's what everybody wants. By the same token, we don't want it so fast so that there's fraud, waste, and abuse. But so as long as there's a balance, I think that, you know, that I think in theory having one certification would be a good idea. But I think that it's not an easy answer. Right, but again, it's just as long as we can hit that right balance between prime and sub, about subcontracting, and also the speed at which someone can get to work, you know, accurately and reliably is what we were striving for.
And how about you, Mr. Laney?
Our goal is to do away with self-certification. We don't see any further need for it. We think once the program is federal-wide, we will then put the veterans on a level playing field and in a good place relative to the other socioeconomic groups. I also want to say that we've got the capacity. It's a case of funding. It's going to be important for the Congress to fund the SBA to do this. We have funded a verification program. This program can ramp up within 6 months, and I expect that within a year we will be verifying every eligible SDVOSB, because the SDVOSB community is very smart. Once they realize that the Congress intends to move toward federal-wide verification, I expect over the course of the next year we will have most, if not all, of the SDVOSBs who want to play with the federal government are going to come to CVE and they're going to get verified. So we will be eliminating the uncertainty in that regard. We can't do much about the women-owned small business arena. The capacity we have now has the ability to scale up. Once we get to complete the transition to VEMS and the model we have, I think we have an efficient and effective program. It's our intent, and we're in discussion with the SBA to transfer that program, potentially lock, stock, and barrel, to the SBA so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we're working closely with them to refine our program to make sure it will plug in effectively to certified.gov, et cetera. So I think that while there's always risks associated with what we're doing, I think those risks, we're taking action to mitigate those risks, and when we're done, this program will be highly effective.
So back to you, Mr. Leghorn, the question about the subcontractors and the contractors, do you think this might engender confusion and, again, just this duplicative process? Do you think we should streamline and get down to one, as Mr. Laney has said?
Oh, I think as an organization, we absolutely think that Mr. Lenny is right on this in terms of we need to get to one standard and we need to get there quick because having a rigorous process makes contracting officers sure, like our veteran-owned small businesses are who they say they are, and they control the purse strings. So we want what is best for our veteran-owned small businesses.
Great, as do I. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Custer. Dr. Dunn, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, General Bergman. Mr. Lenny, please walk me through a few statistics. How many companies do you verify in a typical month? And what's the budget, annual budget?
We run about 1,100 to 1,200 a month. Right now, we have a little over 14,000 firms as of June 30th in the program. We expect in 2018 to deal with about 15,000 applications. The current budget for verification in 2017 for the core element of the verification process was about $12 million. If you add in some of the other attributes we have in our program, we do a rigorous audit program that was mentioned by one of the members to make sure that firms that have been verified stay verified.
Right.
And that runs about $16 million.
On top of?
No, that's about $4 million
Altogether.
in addition. So all in about $16 million.
Okay.
We expect when we go to the higher level, and again, I think within a year we'll know what that is, probably running about $20 million.
How long do you think it takes you to do 18,000 currently self-certified SDVOSBs?
Self-certification is one click of a button on.
Yeah, so but no, you're going to certify them, so how long do you think you get them processed?
Right now, our goal is we verify firms under 60 application days from the time they initiate their application to the time they receive a determination. The only time we stop the clock is when we're waiting on them.
1 year, 2 years to get
Oh,
all those guys through?
How long will it take us to get to 18,000?
18,000,
Year.
additional. These are new business, right?
I think the total will be around 21,000.
Okay.
Okay. We are also verifying 4,000 veteran-owned small businesses.
So
That process will also move to the SBA. We'll have to pay for that. It would be appropriate for the VA to pay for that because that's VA.
and I'm
only.
getting at the budget questions.
We're probably looking at $20 million, I think.
Okay, good. So, Mr. Wong, how much does the SBA, how much does it cost the SBA to run through all the other small business certifications? So what's your annual budget?
Let me defer that to Mr. Gould. He keeps.
I'm sorry? Go ahead, Mr.
If
Gould.
I could defer that answer to Mr.
Sure.
Gould.
Mr. Gould? Annual budget on that?
So the annual budget currently for the
Yes.
certifications, it's a tricky question because we have one pot of money that we use for the certification programs and the business development programs, which
Okay, well, so not the development programs, but
Right.
just the,
so again, it's a tricky question because those two programs are blended so closely together.
give me your best shot. I'm trying to, you're asking, you've asked for resources. I'm working my way towards, how much resources do you need? So
What an analysis I did was trying to figure out how much it's going to cost us to process 33,000 applications a year. I came up with $115 million.
So higher than what I was expecting. The SBA has a network of field offices. Mr. Wong, I think this is you.
Yep.
Network of field offices. The VA doesn't really have that. Does this create some great efficiencies for the program?
So in terms of servicing, yes. We have 68 different field offices, and generally what happens is when you apply to certify.gov, the headquarters function is the one that certifies the business. Once it's certified, it's assigned to the district office in which they reside. Presently, those BOSs, the business opportunity specialists, who work for our staff in the field, are only statutorily authorized to provide business development assistance for 8A. So there would be some additional legislation, I suppose, that's required, but in general, we do have 68 different offices around the country that.
So let's put a pin in that. You need additional legislation. You need to talk to us about that, not in this meeting, but
Yes, sir.
go and do that. So I want to get back to Mr. Gould. The number you gave me confused me a little. Was that an all-up budget, including the prior, the $115 million? Was that including the current SBA?
That is all in,
Okay, plus the VA. Okay.
including the
Plus the
VA,
difference, okay.
not plus, including the VA.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Dunn. Mr. Poliquin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's always a good idea to find efficiencies and save money throughout the federal government or the state or local government whenever you can. What I've found at the VA, sometimes this becomes difficult when you have an organization of 385,000 people that have, in many cases, been there for quite some time. And in many regards, there aren't performance metrics, so we know how these folks are performing, and you see the budget has doubled over the last 8 years, roughly. So you folks are coming before us now asking to do something which to me seems like common sense. But I've also heard a couple of times here, well, you need more money. We spend a lot of our time talking to people that need more money. I would think, and this may not be the case, but if you're taking two functions, same function really, or close to the same function, right, at the VA and at the SBA, and you're combining the two of them, and the SBA has all kinds of regional offices around the country and so forth and so on, and you're putting them together, you'd think you'd save money. That's not what I'm hearing. And you're shaking your hand, Mr. Lenny, so I'm going to give you a shot at telling me why it's going to cost us money instead of saving money. Yeah, let's start with that, and then I have a couple other follow-up questions. Go ahead, sir.
Simple response to that is the expansion of the program. What we expect, if we were to move this to the SBA, do a federal-wide certification program, we'll run from about 14,000 firms and to about 21,000 firms in the program. So you're talking about a 50% increase in the size of the program, just volume.
Just not veterans that own small businesses, everybody else who wants to contract with government. Is that what you mean?
Well, I'm only speaking to the
got that
veteran
wrong.
piece. So, and as Mr. Gould mentioned, they're going to go from 3,500 that they deal with. We deal with 15,000 applications a year right now. I would expect that would go up over 20,000. So it's just an increase in volume. In fact, the cost per
Is that
application
because
over
you
the
know
last 4 years has gone down.
That's because you're going to do away with the self-certification. Is that what you mean?
The self-certification doesn't have an explicit cost because we don't run that. People self-certify. The cost is in the backside. The cost is the real veteran-owned small
You know, I was just
business.
talking to earlier today, someone who owns 22 McDonald's franchises. He's saying the cost of labor is going up so much now that he's finding technology to save headcount, to save money so his business can make it. Is there a possibility of that happening here?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
With the implementation of our veteran engagement management system, we expect to reduce the amount of labor involved. In fact, we just deployed it. We're going
Then
through.
why are you asking for more money?
Because we're going to increase the program by 50%.
Okay. One of the things we've run into at the VA is, and this was a real eye-opener for me. I come from the business community, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for our veterans. That's why I lobbied to get on this committee. And my goal is the same, I think, as everybody else is down the path here. We have 7 million veterans, and we need to take care of them. That's the deal. That's the contract we have with the folks that gave us our country. It's pretty simple to me. But at the same time, you look at the VA, and over the past, I don't know, Neil, how long, they have, I won't get this exactly right, they have 100 different legacy computer systems. 100 of them. And then one can't talk to the other. So you have a veteran that's in Maine, and he needs health care, and he traveled down to Florida to see his kids, and all of a sudden they can't exchange medical records and all this other stuff. It's getting better, I understand that. One of the reasons is that we've now allocated, what, $10 billion for them to fix this mess so the computer systems can talk to each other. You imagine running a business like this? And what I've found, what I believe, I think it's been verified, I think it's been said publicly, is that the reason we have this problem is a lot of these folks build up their own fiefdoms to protect their jobs and what they do with these organizations, and they don't talk to each other, so the people that get screwed are the taxpayers and the veterans that we should be taking care of, using that money to take care of them. So you have two computer systems here, I'm guessing. They talk to each other. What are you going to do about that?
We are happy to offer, in fact, we've offered our system up if they determine that's a better system. If it's not, we'll use their system. Our system goes away.
Yeah, who makes that decision?
They will.
Okay.
We will defer to the SBA because they're going to take the mission.
Okay.
I have no interest in keeping my organization alive in this regard. That's why we're proposing to move the entire organization.
Yeah, I
We
appreciate-
think it's efficient and effective.
I appreciate that. I know I have a little bit of time here, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Leghorn, you represent the Legion. Great folks, we love them. Have the other VSOs weighed in here? And if they have, I've missed it. What do the rest of the VSOs feel about this issue?
I'm really hesitant to speak for other VSOs, but there are several out there that are also on our small business task force, and through our small business task force, I know that we're all locking in step with the proposal to move verification from VA to SBA.
Okay, do you have any concerns? And if there, what would be the top 2 concerns you would have and you other folks at the other VSOs have about doing this? It's going to cost more money. You come to us, we don't have the money. Is that one of them?
Cost is definitely an issue. VA, to their credit, has been funding the CVE on their own agency-generated money.
Yep.
So cost is an issue when we move that to the SBA, because I don't think VA is going to just give that money over to the SBA.
No, you're kidding. You mean to tell me a federal agency here in Washington not wanting to cut their budget? You don't mean that, do you, Mr. Leghorn? I think my time is up. Thank you very much for being candid. Thank you, sir. You're back.
Thank you, Mr. Poliquin. Mr. Lenny, a persistent complaint about the SDVOSB, and by the way, I agree with Dr. Marshall that either we come up with a better acronym or figure out a pronunciation of it. But anyway, the verification program is that bad actors misrepresent ownership of companies. In fact, there is a term used, the storefront veteran, in some cases. That's for those of you who've delved into this a little bit. And in a previous life, I did do some pro bono work with SDVOSBs trying to get themselves certified. But sometimes they are caught, the bad actors are caught, and the companies are eliminated. But too often, these same entities, kind of like whack-a-mole, remedy the non-compliance on paper, but not in reality. And then they get re-verified, and they're back in the game. In what we're looking at going forward, what are we doing to end this? And how would you recommend the SBA solve the problem once and for all? And basically, you use the tech term, close the back doors.
Bottom line up front, Mr. Chairman, we're not going to solve the problem of criminals. We haven't solved in any other sector of society. There will continue to be criminals who seek to take advantage of a government program. However, we have taken a number of actions that I think have been very helpful. Here in the VA, we have an audit program, a no notice. A man from one of our people shows up on site to confirm that a veteran-owned small business continues to be owned and controlled by a veteran. That does not solve the storefront problem in terms of another term called pass-throughs. That's a contracting issue, but I think we have largely addressed the issue of, are you really owned and controlled by a veteran? Yes, there are some that can paper it over. There are some that commit fraud. We've referred those to the IG. I have a risk manager who works very closely with the IG, and we've seen a decline in the number of those firms. If you do business with the VA in any reasonable capacity, you will get visited no notice by an auditor, and that has made a major difference in terms of veteran-owned small business realizing that we're serious with the program.
Good. Well, speaking of audits, Mr. Gould, VA audits, SDVOSBs, after they've been verified, as we just heard Mr. Lenny say, what level of auditing or ongoing oversight does SBA currently exercise in other small business programs, and we got a plan going forward? Or is that Mr. Wong? Okay.
He runs the current program.
Okay.
So we have some safeguards. They're not perfect. We're making progress, but it's not perfect. But we have things like size protests. In some regards, I think that in order to reduce the number of backdoors, in order, as we call them, fronts, I think having a more solid process in the front door is going to be really going to be one of the best safeguards that we can have. Additionally,
Let me ask you a question. So, do you believe if I'm not hearing that you're saying audits are useful going forward. Did I misinterpret what you said?
I don't want to say that you didn't do anything. I would just say that I did not say that.
No, okay, but that was kind of getting from, you were talking about front doors, back doors. I
Yeah.
didn't hear about, we're going to use the audits to do this, or are we going to do this through our processes and designing the system to be able to update, or do we have to physically audit?
So we can do that. What SBA has right now with all of our certification programs, we ostensibly have a strong entrance barrier, and once that is through, then we have annual reporting requirements, and then we have analysts that look at these annual reviews or this continuing eligibility. We also have the public and competitors. I mean, competitors are great for policing things, and they have protests. But so we even have protests, and we even have a mechanism by which if somebody protests size and they're untimely, because I'm a lawyer by trade, but sometimes lawyers play games, and if they're obviated because of time, SBA even has its own ability to
That's
file
great,
a protest
and I
like
hate to
that.
cut you off here, because now that I know you are a lawyer, I know you would run out my time if I let you. But the point is, the audit verification process that you just articulated, in other words, letting those affected parties, those negatively affected parties, basically take care of those bad actors by letting you know who they are, kind of help. It's kind of a team effort on it. That's to get everybody invested in the program going forward, especially those honest business-minded veterans who want to build a small business. They'll feel included. Mr. Leghorn, you get the last word here as far as your thoughts on, how about the audits? Will they be helpful, hindrance? What are you thinking?
So the issue with the audits is that it really cuts into a small business's time and effort and their capacity to make money when you show up for a site visit. That has always been the problem, and what's the right level of government intrusion necessary to verify that you are who you say you are versus, if you are who you say you are, let's let you go on and go about your business.
So going forward then, if the SBA, as they take over the program, look at the audit as a tool that, if properly applied and doesn't require small businesses, let's say, to add compliance people or add other, limited resources that you have as a small business, to then apply those resources towards successfully passing an audit. So it's working together to make sure it doesn't stay onerous. Any part of it stays onerous. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct. And if I could add one more thing real quick, I think there is a great avenue for SBA or VA to do something along the lines of improving community policing, and in fact promoting it. And also, just as Mr. Wallen said, there are still status protests that could be levied through the GAO.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So I see no further questions from the dais up here. If there are no further questions, then the panel is now excused. Thank you again to Chairman Kelly and Ranking Member Adams for hosting this hearing. Do either you, Ms. Adams or Ranking Member Custer, have any final remarks before I close?
No, sir, I just want to thank all of the panelists for being here and all of the members of the committee.
Thank you. A couple of thoughts. Based upon what Dr. Marshall said about, simplifying, getting a new name, I would suggest to you, we love, acronyms and words and whatever, but, personally, alliteration helps me figure out what it is we're trying to do. But I would suggest to you, if we stratify, we simplify, and then especially from VA as you transition out and SBA as you transition in, you support one another in the lessons learned that you've already learned in VA. Don't go, a year from now over a cup of coffee saying, oh yeah, we could have told you that a year ago, type of thing. So support one another, so in the end we support the veterans in their efforts to become successful small business owners. Small business programs and contracting reform are important to all of us. And I know that Ranking Member Custer shares this view because we've been a good team here for 18 months on the VA O&I committee. We have prioritized these issues on the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee hearings. We devote as much time as we can, but the reality is that the Small Business Committee is dedicated to these issues now full-time. We welcome the opportunity to work with you. Thank you to our witnesses for sharing your knowledge, your perspectives, and for continuing to highlight the need for government-wide verification. I look forward to working with all of you to craft such legislation. I would be remiss in saying the 115 million that's an interesting figure. We're going to have to talk about that. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.